With us today at Market, we have Pelle Guldborg Hansen, CEO and founder of iNudgeyou, to tell us more about nudging in marketing. What kind of businesses do you see use nudging?
Well, all kinds of businesses. I think, again, if you take standard products, we're quite good at selling laptop, music, shampoo using nudge principles. And the consequence has been that people are quite good at washing their hair and listening to music and so forth. So a lot of businesses already know how to use nudging to the extent that they can use it. But where the huge potential is where you have areas with companies who have difficulties getting consumers to take up the product because the product ought to work, but consumers find it difficult to use. So that's where the huge potential is. And there's a lot of companies and organizations and institutions working in that zone. So that's where we're going to see the next kind of marketing revolution, I think.
Yeah, can you give one or two examples where you think nudging will be used more?
Yeah, especially within health industry. When it comes to getting people to adhere to the prescription plans that the doctors have given them, then nudging has a huge potential in having people actually taking their medication on time. And of course, this is good for the medical companies, but it's also good for the health, for the societal health, right? Another place is recently we took over a supermarket for, I think it was 5 weeks. And the aim was to promote the sales of fruit and vegetables. And of course, a supermarket is quite good and refined in how to market their products. But when it comes to a whole category of marketing fruit and vegetables, it turns out that some of these tools that you can find in the deeper levels of nudging are actually quite effective. So in this case, we had an increase in the sales of fruit and vegetables of 24%, which is quite huge, and we had it without any loss in profit or customers. So it turns out that you can use these deeper levels of marketing to these particular goods that we have had really big difficulties of getting people to adopt.
So in that case, with the vegetables in the supermarkets, what did you actually do?
Well, we based most of the sales on something which is called cognitive mapping, which means that usually you will have consumers going into a supermarket, they'll have a plan, they'll have something that they need to buy. And of course when you're looking for the fruit and vegetables, you want to find it in the fruit and vegetable section, so you need a fruit and vegetable section. But one of the things which have been missed, but which is quite obvious when you get it, is that if you're looking at wine, you're quite likely to buy grapes, for instance, with the wine. If you're looking at cheese, then you're quite likely to buy grapes again if it's just next to the cheese. So what we actually did was we moved a lot of the fruit and vegetables into areas where you had products which was kind of matching in the situation. The cognitive map says, okay, you're going to have cheese and wine. You probably like some biscuits and some grapes and some fruit to go with that. Pineapple, for instance. And that had quite a big take up. We also used it to get people to buy more light products. So that was just basically rearranging shelf space so you would have light products in the more salient areas. And then we also promoted light products by, for instance, moving sugary soft drinks out of the fridge and then only having light products in the fridge. So if you wanted a soft drink, well, you could get a cold one, but then it would be light. Again, also just moving light products to the main places, to the main shelves, and then having the sugary drinks on top shelves. Stuff like that works quite nicely. But one of the basic things was this kind of cognitive mapping where you say, well, when people enter the supermarket, what would they be likely to buy of fruit and vegetables? That would be stock-up items like onions, potatoes, and so forth. Stuff that you always have in your kitchen, but you haven't thought about whether you needed them. And then when you enter the supermarket, then you have these suggested sales. So you would find carrots next to the minced meat, for instance, because you would be likely to make spaghetti bolognese, and then you might need carrots for that, or you might need peppers or whatever. So you try to bundle vegetables with other kinds of goods, which you usually don't do in a supermarket because you put things into those spaces where they're confined.
So this is all about customer behavior.
Yeah.
Would you say that you're changing customers' behavior, or that you are using customers' normal behavior and use that to your benefit?
Well, that's an ontological question about what an action is and what behavior is. In some cases, what you actually have is that you basically have the same behavior as they always have, and then you have another effect, right? So this is substitution sales, for instance. And that's quite easy. It's extremely easy to get somebody to pick up one kind of soft drink rather than another kind of soft drink, have people pick up an apple instead of a pear or something like that. When it comes to increasing the sales, this is more about changing behavior then, because this is about searching out those critical points where the customer is ready and motivated to take up a particular good that they wouldn't otherwise have bought. So there you're not just kind of using the behavior which already goes on, you're actually creating a behavior which is available to create at that point. And this, of course, has been known in many years. If you go into a burger restaurant, you might order a burger and then they'll ask you if you want an ice cream, which is at one level quite weird, right? Because if you want a burger, why would you like an ice cream? But it's a suggestion sale, which is just an increase in sales. And you can do the same thing with fruit and vegetables, and that's actually no problem. But that's a case of changing behavior rather than just substituting the product that ends up in the basket.
Do you see any nudging going on in the web sales, or?
Yeah, we do a lot. We ourselves do a lot of digital nudging, it's called, and it's basically about how everything from how to place products to the series of how products are proposed to colors, for instance, are very effective. You know, your choice between green and red is not just a trivial choice; it's a choice with effects. It's about a lot of what we call dynamic choosing, where you need feedback effects. A lot of the things that goes on online, for instance, that everybody knows about is the need for people to know that the program is working while they're using it. So that's why we have the download bar, for instance. But in a lot of programs, you don't have this feeling of progress and functionality. So often when you sit with a homepage that doesn't provide people with the path that they want to follow through the web architecture, there you would like to look for what goes wrong. So in marketing, you would know about people leaving the items in the basket. That's a huge potential. But you would be sitting much like in Google Analytics and look for all kinds of points where the consumer drops off and make an inconvenient choice. And then you will go in and you will diagnose and say, why did the guy close down the browser? Or why was he tricked to go to another site to look for the same good? Is it something about how we put up prices? Is it something about how many clicks you have to take in order to get through the last part of the internet shop and so forth? Again, a lot of this is well known in marketing. And there's a lot of nice strategies of making things easier and getting consumers to go through these paths without thinking too much. But sometimes you really want people to think at the right points, and that's especially when you want them to buy a plan which has a long-term profit for the consumer as well as the company. To give an instance from the real world, there was this experiment in Norway where they tried to put up the lifetime costs of white appliances, because usually what you have as a consumer is that you face, for instance, a washing machine which is cheap but use a lot of electricity, and of course you might be green and want to buy the washing machine which uses less electricity, but usually it would be higher quality and much more expensive. So at the point of purchase, you will have a consumer facing a cheap machine and an expensive machine. And in that case, you actually somehow want the consumer to choose the more expensive product. And you can go so and so forth with branding and so on. But in this very simple experiment, what they actually just did was to take the lifetime electricity cost of the expensive and the cheap washing machine, and put next to the price. It wasn't even optimal. But still, it led to the average electricity white appliance leaving the store to be 4.9% more energy effective, which is good for society. It's also good for the guys supplying or the shop supplying the white appliances because they sell more expensive products. And it's good for the customers because they'll save money in the long term. This was very simple, just putting in the lifetime cost, but this is not a case of trying to get the consumer just to make it easier for them to go through the purchase. It's actually getting them to stop at the right point, take the right kind of information into consideration, and then making the right purchase both for the shop and for society and for the citizen again.
It sounds like nudging is much about visibility, making consequences and choices visible to the customer.
Well, when you go into what we call good nudging, it's about making consequences visible and framing them in the right way so that suddenly you become more interested, for instance, in buying an e-book rather than the physical book, because this will be good on the CO2 account, right? And when you engage in this kind of good nudging, making something visible, salient, and so forth is a really nice thing. But then sometimes you might go for the less visible stuff, which is less intuitive, and that's also the reason why it's much difficult to explain it in language. But that might, for instance, be, again, if we take this principle of asymmetric dominance, you have, for instance, if you were to sell a DVD player, you would have the expensive one, you would have the cheap one, right? And you would like to sell the expensive one rather than the cheap one. So what you do when you use this principle is that you take a third DVD player, which has almost the same price as the expensive one, but it's just much more inferior compared with the expensive DVD player. This makes the consumer focus on the two expensive ones, comparing those two, and in that light, suddenly the DVD player, which is the expensive one, looks much more attractive because it has this kind of ugly sibling next to it. And this effect is something you can use to get people, again, to buy the expensive dishwasher, which is more energy efficient, but you can also just use it to get people to buy a more expensive DVD player. And that's where it's not visible. And we call it non-transparent, and there are some ethical issues there. It depends on which kind of shop, which kind of product, but what you often see is that these principles are not leveraged to sell the things that we ought to buy, because we think like, well, consumers ought to buy them, so we don't need marketing. So you often see them just kind of used in standard marketing, and often, again, on a superficial level. There's a lot to gain in the literature from these kind of more deep level nudges, but the huge potential is actually to be found in those areas where the consumers would like to be informed, where you can use transparency as your ally to sell your product because it has long-term good benefits for the customer as well. And that's also what makes up for a sustainable product and a sustainable business, that you want people to come back, for instance.
Mm-hmm. As I read it, there must be a huge potential for a lot of companies that sells products, goods that are sent to people at home. Let's say I buy a bicycle, I get it home with some kind of package on. There must be a huge potential getting me to use the product better, to buy more stuff after sales, after service.
Definitely, there is this nice literature surrounding how to get customers to return, or rather how to get people to engage in a prolonged effort. That's where you find the literature, especially around habits and routines. For instance, when you just have the strictly online sales, which would be like getting people to log back into Facebook or into LinkedIn, what you have is actually a sales structure which reminds of Kinder eggs, and then with a certain investment made. So basically what you have is, first, if you're bored, you will have an external trigger where you're kind of considering what to do. And you have experience, for instance, of tapping into your smartphone, and there you would like to have your product, for instance, the Facebook app, to be salient with a red dot on it, which made you kind of curious. What goes on? Who commented on what? And this curiosity thing is a very good thing to use to get people to move into a certain product range. So, for instance, you have it in Kinder eggs. You know there's something, there's some toy in there, but you don't know what. So people become curious. Then when you open it, the toy don't have to be expensive. It's just a surprise. You don't know what it is, and that the brain treats yourself in a way there, which is kind of funny because it actually becomes, it over-evaluates the value of what you got. I think everybody knows this from the Kinder Egg, but the same thing happens, for instance, on Facebook, because when you open the page, you see things that you knew and you would expect there, faces of people you know, but the information is new there. And then ultimately what you do is that you like something or you comment something, which actually invests the customer in the product, so that next time they take up the smartphone, they'll have a red dot again on the icon because somebody liked whatever you liked or something like that. And you can use that for online sales when you send people something as well, having this element of surprise in there, having this element of investment in there. Especially the element of investment is necessary to get people to go back. Some products are good at using this. They might put everything from a chocolate in your package, which just makes a better experience of opening it. Other products have this kind of interaction, end-user interaction, where you pack up your products and then you have to do something, and in that process, you invest in the product again. So for instance, with bicycles, I've seen that some people sell the service arrangement as part of the unpacking of the product. So when you receive your bike, you unpack, and then there's this service that you can subscribe to. And when you subscribe to that, then you actually hand in information, which for instance would be your email address, but where you hand it in a way so it's allowed for the company to send you different kind of service notices, that now you can do this with your bike and you can get whatever for the bike again, which the consumer otherwise would sign off on, where they say, I'm going to buy the bike, but you're not going to send me any kind of advertising afterwards. And I've seen that in a lot of the packages you get, where people actually use the package and the surprise and the nice thing about getting the product to lift them back into the store and to sign up for receiving future information about that kind of product.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.